Yeah, thanks, Pablo, for the warm introduction. It's great to be here, just moving back from Seattle after I was there, the director of nutrition, and had the chance to work on many things that relate to what we do here today. But let me first welcome everyone here, also online, and express my big thanks for having me and hosting that amazing Scale Up Challenge. And I'm great it's called a Scale Up Challenge because scale and impact is what we want to achieve. But first, a big thanks to Imna and Hendrik Christensen, who are the founders of Blend Hub and are really an example of creating a shared value business. Thanks also to EIT, to really investing in B2B partnerships like the ones we see here today. And also thanks to all of you scale-ups dedicating your passion and your entrepreneurial spirit into your venture, and we hope that we can make a difference today. Thanks also to all the representatives of the media and the participants, and last but not least, my team who helped me to set me up for that speech today. So the EIT Food Innovation Challenge, Scaling Up Affordable Nutrition. I was asked to kind of provide an inspirational speech, and the question I'm often asked is, Andreas, is it kind of a cookbook? Can you give us a recipe for kind of creating a scale-up business model, the checkbox system? And I've worked on these checkbox systems. They're great, but they are not one size fits all. So is it maybe an art? Yeah, it is a little bit of art, and I think I'm not sure you can see the piece of art here. So I think it's a great place and inspirational as such to be here. But is it also maybe a bit of science? And I would say, yeah, it's a technical discipline, often underrated to create a partnership business impact case, because we are living in a hybrid world. Not only this event is hybrid, not only some of the cars we drove here are hybrid, but I think there's a lot of tailwind for hybrid business cases, and it is a new discipline. You cross boundaries, you need to translate, you need to be aware of that. So the complexity and the opportunities, I think, are greater than ever. But getting back to the question, what does it take to really scale up an idea? And I think it starts with the mindset, as so often. So we've heard it today, 1 + 1 needs to equal more than 2. The sum needs to be greater than the sum of its parts. And from 6 years advising WFP Innovation Accelerator as a mentor, I've seen a pattern what successful scale-up entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, if they're part of a greater ecosystem, have. And I think it's the visionary mindset paired ideally with an execution, I would say, ability, this kind of growth mindset, really having that vision and striving for it, the optimism to really overcome challenges combined with, I think, a certain adaptability and the diligence and grit. It is a journey. It takes time, and you really need to put a lot of energy and also, I would say, an openness towards technological opportunities, which not only for production, but also in the age of digitization make a big difference. So when I talk about the mindset, and I think Hendrik in his speech this morning already addressed it, that's the good news. There's no shortage of challenges. And challenges for disruptive innovators are opportunities. So what are the challenges, the limitations you really kind of can take on here, and you are taking on here? 3 billion people worldwide are at the risk of micronutrient deficiencies. And it's not only developing countries where we see 850 million people going to bed hungry every night, and women and children being the most vulnerable. And if you want to say so, the most valuable targets of improved nutrition, because, I mean, good nutrition improves opportunities over a lifetime. And if you take metrics into account, disease-adjusted life years you can save if you kind of invest in children or in the first 1,000 days, even if with pregnant women, I mean, this kind of produces benefit over a lifetime and then makes nutrition one of the best investments into human development. For 3 billion potential customers are really waiting for solutions to be brought to them. Amazing business opportunity. 850 million people going to bed hungry, 60 billion euros. it costs that Germany has obese people, and 150 billion euro is an estimated direct and indirect cost of obesity in the EU. So the notion of making transparent what people eat and allowing them to really understand their dietary needs and meeting them in a different way, I think is, again, a huge opportunity. 40% of the food worldwide is wasted. In Africa, mostly from the producer to the shops due to logistical challenges. In Europe, mostly it arrived already at retail or at the consumer's plate, and it's wasted there. Disrupt that. And I'm working on a couple of projects, also on a board member assignment, for example, AI, predicting food waste in the supply chain. There's multiple ways of doing it. But I mean, circular approaches like we have seen here, I think is a fantastic opportunity for ingredient producers to make a huge difference in reducing the food waste. The competing use of food in the global landscape is another area to look into and disrupt it at different angles. Soybeans, one of the largest edible oil crops in China, 40% of that is used for animal feed. In the US, 40% of that is used for biofuels. And then you have a food price crisis, and edible oil is one of the most calorie-dense foods people in poverty tend to eat. It's so fundamental for frying and cooking healthy vegetables, for example. So I think we can no longer afford that people in Africa compete with animals somewhere else. So find solutions for synthetic productions of edible oil with fermentation, for example. Find solutions for feeding these animals in a different way, or find solutions for synthetic fuels. And agriculture, last not least, accounts for around about 20% of all the greenhouse gas emissions, if I'm not mistaken. So there's tons of opportunities being in the agricultural capital of Spain here, if not to say the EU, when it comes to fruit production. I think there's a huge opportunity to just make farming more climate smart. Thank you for taking these challenges on and putting, your personal energy and opportunities behind that, because we not only need to challenge that status quo, but we need to do it systemically and lasting. I think otherwise it's not going to be at scale. Let me put forward two examples, I think, where one can learn a little bit from success and failure, which one is the food fortification initiative I founded at BASF, which at the end of the day brought micronutrients to 600 million people worldwide. How was that possible? It was a dedicated team we had. We had, a company backing us up, but it's also B2B partnerships with Miller's. It's public-private partnerships with the UN, committed nonprofits, also the Gates Foundation at the end of the day. And it's also that we accepted right from the beginning, it needs to be a balance between impact and humanitarian goals on the one hand side, but don't overplay it, in particular at the beginning. You need to be economically sustainable. So accept there needs to be a commercial business case, and that's not an either or. You're not just a humanitarian person or just a business person. I think it's that blend that is the ingredient of success here. I've also had the privilege to work with Emmanuel Faber when he still was heading the Danone communities in Bangladesh, and partnered with Mohammed Yunus, who is unfortunately a bit under political pressure in Bangladesh, and I hope he can resolve that. My deepest sympathy for him. I've met him several times in person. And we created a fully fortified yogurt, 90 grams, and in absence of a cooling chain that was homogenized, this yogurt. So you lose some, by pasteurization, you also lose some nutrients in the yogurt, but you can put it back with added nutrients and distribute it then with the microfinance ladies, village by village in Bangladesh. That worked fairly well at the beginning, but at the end, I think it was an idea of cross-subsidization. You can sell something in the rural area, and you can do that with women entrepreneurs on a really grassroots level, but the distances were huge. A factory of a smaller industrial scale, to fill that, it really took a cross-subsidization, selling that product, which was, I mean, fully branded in a really nice fashion in Dhaka, where the people were less malnourished. Danone Grameen, with his Shakti Doi yogurt, sold the yogurt for double the price in Dhaka. Cross-subsidized on the rural level, I mean, the additional cost of distribution. So these are the models I think one need to be very creative with, and there it becomes a little bit the mixture of the art and the toolbox again to really make that impact happen in one company. And I think it's great that you have a partner here with BlendUp and EIT that can provide you with continuous access to adapt, learn, and readjust your business models in that fashion. Finally, I think what I really liked and learned today is there's a lot of black box to be unblack boxed in the food and ingredient industry, and not only in the food ingredient industry, but also in the retail sector. I mean, who knows really what he or she is buying in a retail market? How can digitization help us to not only understand whether the ingredients are just in there and its quality, but how can I make more informed choices? More climate smart choices, more choices that meet my dietary needs. Instead of going potentially with my kids in a supermarket and being distracted right from the beginning to make the choices that really benefit me. So I think BlendUp's commitment to really enhance transparency, making it traceable, making it visible, using data, making that potentially investable is so much aligned with my personal vision that I'm really glad I have the opportunity to help you today with that speech. Going forward, I mean, there's more good news for the ones that want to disrupt challenges, which is that nutrition is a perfect textbook aggregation of market failures. So if you ask yourself why we are in the status quo, that we talk about a completely new food system and many things that need to be changed, is you could write an economics book about what is the market failures of nutrition. So information asymmetry. A classic. We addressed that. I mean, consumers don't exactly understand what ingredients is in the food. Nobody wants to become a nutritionist necessarily. And then, I mean, what does it mean that I have a certain iron content, a certain vitamin A content, a certain protein content, certain calories? It's really complicated. And I think here, anything you can do on, let's say, fixing these market failures is a cutting the edge business opportunity for you. So this is real in a market economy. If there's market failures and there's public goods relating to that, this is something you can take into account. So transparency versus information asymmetry. Externalities. I mean, I've talked about the cost of obesity, for example, or the cost of undernutrition, or the cost of the seasonal vitamin D epidemic we have in Europe, for example, or in the US every winter. Where is the business fashion of addressing that to help to address these, to internalize these public goods? What are the public goods? I mean, it's better education, reduced sick days, increased productivity for companies, and ultimately reduced health system costs. And I mean, there's countries with a prevalence of nutritional deficiencies of 20, 30, 40%, anemia, partly 60, 70% among women of childbearing age, which has dramatic consequences for childhood survival and child development over lifetime. This is huge costs, but these costs are not necessarily I would say what the consumer is ready to pay for, or a government necessarily is provided investment to. And I think here, partnerships become crucial. If I would have charts, which I by purpose did not bring today, you would see two concentric circles typically: private sector and private sector business case, and public sector, public goods. And I think the sweet spot of where we want to be with our impact business models is the overlap of both. And partnership builds the bridge, not only B2B partnerships, but multi-sectoral partnerships. We have governments that have a stake into these public goods. We have government-sponsored and supported agencies and nonprofits that have the mandate to help. And I think partnership became, over the last 20 years, I can oversee, having worked intensely in that, also as a UN business partnership trainer for the UN. I think we are way beyond that if. Should we really do partnerships? Can we work with business? I mean, I've heard all these reservations, in particular in the nutrition community, that, oh, they are into profit. That's a divergent goal. We are into public goods. We want to, have a healthy population. I think it's about a shared goal overspanning these diverging motivations. And the diverging motivations come often with very complementary competences. And these complementary competencies is the equation of 1 + 1 equals more than 2. Because why would you partner if you just double down on something? Sometimes that works. Often it's about the complementarity. And if you look at the examples I've given, scale-up often comes with an ecosystem that surrounds a business model. So I would say first you need strategy, then you need a product, obviously first, then strategy. And then if you look at partnerships and a business model that embarks on partnerships, what is your ecosystem? What role for standards and norms, for example? Standards and norms is a very cost-effective intervention in markets. Can start with labeling requirements. And for you, it means, understanding these norms. And I hear often business people saying, and that's maybe 20 years ago, oh, regulation as such is bad for the business. It totally depends. If you have a sustainable business case, and all of you have sustainability as a cutting-edge competitive advantage. You're either very circular, you are much more climate smart than what you want to disrupt. You have a ton of, I would say, opportunities in the sustainability space. Look at the reporting obligations that come from the EU in 2024. Every kind of mid-sized company needs to report on sustainability and have an ESG report. Many businesses say, oh gosh, no, it's kind of another obligation. I think it's a great opportunity. It's really a great opportunity for you to kind of educate even larger companies that your ingredients making a big difference for sustainability can enhance the footprint and the ESG performance of larger companies quite significantly. And that's that kind of dual bottom line attitude where you need to have that business case on the one hand side, but also need an equally sophisticated play on the sustainability business case. And I think this is the winning recipe I would like to give you on the way, and seek the right advice instead of forum shopping all sorts of advice. Seek the right advice of people that can go very vertical with you on that. And I've done that 15 years, dedicated 15 years of my life, traveling 60 countries to make an impact business case on food ingredients. It was totally worthwhile to really go deep into that, adjust. It wasn't always that linear in a sense of, okay, I know that's going to work and I have tons of great partners behind me. It was a constant, I would say, experiment. At one point you reach the scale and then it lifts off and you feel like I've made it. I hope for you to give you a couple of more, in the last 2 minutes, a couple of more checkbox ingredients for success I've seen and distilled for you. So 1, have a clear social mission and vision statement. Take that day, sit down with your employees and say, what's our mission, what's our vision? Get a facilitator to do that if you can. Understand your market and your value chain and where you sit in the value chain, and really be crystal clear that a hybrid market can exist and you just disrupt something where you take the place of that kind of disrupted provider, or you have to build that market. Sometimes there is no market for what you do. And I've worked 15 years on something there was no market. Selling ingredients to poor people who are, forgive me, vulnerable and low-income people in Africa, crazy. How can you think that pharma-grade ingredients go to Africa and find a market? If you know that play, you can do it. Scalability and understand your metrics and data. So you should be very clear on measuring your economic and impact success. Don't overdo it. It's not, it's a means, not an end, but you have to have, I would say, a system in place. Technology for processing, digitization, analytics, quality assurance, knowing your regulation, knowing your standards, I mean, that's bread and butter, I would say. Complementarity in the talent. You all come from an inventor, development, research space. You have a product created at one point, realizing that you are maybe not a great strategic marketing person. You need support, partnerships, hiring the right people, investing in your people. I think that's another point to take into account. Storytelling and funding. Funding, again, is a means, not an end, and you want to get self-sustainable at one point, but the typical hockey stick in results, you need catalytic funding, and that depends quite a bit on well-founded, evidence-based storytelling. Finally, user centricity and local ownership. I think that's something where a lot of potential sits in global replication. So really understanding your markets, and if you venture out of Europe, I think it's important and interesting to look at that too. Let me close with, again, congratulating yourself to being a winner today, but you won a jump board. And I hope we stay kind of connected over the coming years, and you use the technical support that BlendHub offers to scale your business from where you are currently and add impact. And it's not that impact comes on top. I think impact and sustainability is the key driver of business these days. And I think taking that home and celebrating a little bit your achievement today, I think that's my wish for the next couple of hours here in Murcia, and being with you and celebrating the success you have achieved up to this point is what I came for. Thank you very much.
We have some time to ask some questions that you might want to know about Andreas, about what do we need to focus on the future. Hand over the mic.
Or online, if there's any online comments.
Or if they write it on the chat online, we'll answer as them as well. I have one. So you talked about having startups sometimes focus, let's say, on the tech side, on researching, and maybe we focus too much on the specifics of a product, or we fall in love even. We've seen it even in BlendHub with a recipe, right? But then you need the market, or you need the timing. So when we start losing focus, where would you advise us to start? You know, like a hard stop, and this is the first priority.
I think, again, I would start with the mindset and the self-awareness. And that's kind of putting yourself outside of your shoe in your current position and reflecting on what you are great on and what you are maybe not so great on. And I mean, if you came to the point that you are a scale-up that won an award, typically a lot of things you have done right. So you developed the product, and then, I mean, out of that confidence, and having been a consumer, not a producer probably for most of your life, there's the idea of, oh, I can develop that product from a lab scale, put it in some bags and carry it to some supermarkets and sell it there. But then being that entrepreneur, understanding, well, you know, it's a complete value chain, and from a raw material provider to, I mean, getting clean ingredients, maybe adding value with formulations, adding value with connecting with different industry segments. Food industry is a very conservative industry for a reason. I mean, food safety is a big role, and you can build a reputation over 50 years, and you can destroy it in 5 seconds or in 5 days. So I think there's a value of looking at the value chain and understanding where are you strong in and where do you need strong partnerships, and making the right choices in these partnerships. They have huge transactional costs. So getting advice on that of people that understand the subject matter and the ballgame of strategic partnerships, and I think that's a good reason you're here today. I would advise you to understand first what you are not good in. I think that's as valuable as the confidence of knowing what you're good in, and then focus in a sense of investing your precious time and resources in a couple of things, and that to be the right things rather than turning every stone around. That would be my advice.
You talked about public-private partnerships, and this is always a complicated matter, especially in a world where accounting is not as global and not as connected, not as circular as it could be. What are some of your recommendations on really connecting? Because there's perhaps sometimes, and I've seen it, for example, when you deal with the university ecosystem or even the public ecosystem in Spain or other areas in Europe, there's some reluctance to anything that looks like the accounting side of things, right? It's much more philosophical than sometimes it is tangible, or so it seems. What are some of your recommendations on opening up conversation with public partners and really getting those to a place where they can actually lead to some potential positive collaboration?
Great question. I think on the meta level, there is a movement that tries to make social and environment as accountable in terms of numbers standard as the economic part. And I mean, if you look in how many people are employed to make an economic balance sheet happen in a big corp, and how many kind of very expensive people are involved in a joint venture in a company, it's hilarious how little people are dealing with the fact of making E and S accountable. Even so, I admit it's not that easy, in particular with the social accountability, because if that should be investable, you need standards. And standardizing impact, I've worked on that for 20 years, and there's people much more technical than me, but it is something that is developing, and at one point, I think we need to find an 80-20 solution where any accountability and a kind of a standard for allowing companies to measure their impact is better than none or many. So I hope there will be harmonization. I know it's difficult in international relations to come to an agreement, but I know there's heavy work on that. With public-private partnerships, I think it starts with accepting this is not less technical than merger and acquisition. And you would hire an expensive law firm and probably an expensive consulting firm on top to do a strategic merger and acquisition. I would say casually going around and picking a few people you see and starting negotiations is probably can work, but not necessarily does work. I mean, you start with a need assessment, you see where your needs in your business plan are, you would screen the geographics and the institutional landscape, and then do a very strategic partnering process from, I mean, negotiating it to kind of nailing it down. There's different formats to do that. So I think it doesn't take the same army of people like you would do for a bigger joint venture, but I would invest in the technical capacity. And it's a not protected, I would say, space, but not everybody who maybe has a partner at home should do partnerships. It's like also a little bit, I would say, complicated and complex and needs some experience, like you would kind of do it for any other business. And I've worked in a position where I catalyzed a lot of partnerships and then others took over. I think that was like 15 years back, and I saw a lot of promising things failing because of the, I would say, professional capacity, not only to kind of screen and strike these partnerships, but then execute them. And there's a lot of pitfalls there. I mean, different language, different background, different corporate culture, diverging interests. How much can you nail these things down? How flexible can agreements still be? What are the governance mechanisms? I mean, lots of good questions where I feel if you invest in that, a certain quality standard helps.
Is there still time? Okay, good. So earlier today, you and also Pablo were talking about the digitization or this hybrid mode of food production, but also the whole chain. and betting on that future, what are potential alternative or maybe parallel scenarios next to this hybrid digitized food system?
Well, I think that's a great statement, and I'm not sure I want to embark on alternatives, but rather would describe a use case for that, because I think here at LandHub you have the beauty of having a portable ingredient production and food production facility, which allows to measure input versus output, and you can create not only transparency for anyone who sources these products, but at one point, if these ingredients make a big difference for society, that could also be a very investable impact case. And I mean, in the health space, you see a market for tokens coming up. So data like I'm compliant to food safety regulations, or I'm compliant to nutrition requirements like added nutrients, which have a clear societal goal and have a multi-million euro and dollar societal value, not to mention the individual humanitarian aspect of that. I mean, I think it's unacceptable that in some of the countries like 20, 30, 40, 50% of the foods are just not meeting the iron or vitamin A or folic acid requirements. I think it's too late in the day to just trust brochures of people that have the capacity of other people producing brochures, and they're really good in that. But I mean, I do not want to finance people producing brochures, but I want to have the right food I kind of demand, or the law is requiring. So I think we still have, again, a mindset issue that many in leadership positions haven't been exposed to the opportunities of digitization. And I think it's a job of translating it and showing and leading by example to show, well, it doesn't need necessarily complicated chemical analytics to find out what is in the food, and the food is eaten in most of the cases before you have the analytics. So I think there's really huge opportunities also in data generation. I mean, nutritional data is a white spot on the landscape. It takes millions and millions and years to come to a prevalence map in a country. There's unique opportunities with AI and ML to assess data in countries without kind of the very invasive blood sampling of whole populations. And if you then know on a population level where nutritional needs and deficiencies sit, market-based initiatives could serve consumers in a much better way. And if these consumers then would be able to understand, and even in developing countries, everybody nowadays, or not everybody, but many people have a cheap cell phone for a couple of dollars, you could much more kind of overcome these market failures with digitization, because it creates transparency and it also makes progress visible. And I think that's the challenge nutrition has. It's not for no reason called hidden hunger. Sometimes it's not very visible, and it doesn't become more actionable by not being visible. And digitization has huge opportunities there.
Well, Andreas, thank you very much. A big round of applause. Thank you.